Okay, it's 12:01. It's time to get started on this. Thank you everyone for joining us. This is Word on the Street, Admin Trends and Challenges for 2017. My name is Eric Dreschfield. I'm your host today on this webinar. So let's roll. So a little bit of housekeeping. You have a chat panel in your window on your side panel, I guess. If you have questions for any of the panelists throughout the webinar, please submit them through there, and we will try our best to answer them throughout the webinar. And if there are a few remaining at the end, we'll probably have a little time left for some Q&A after everything is over. If you have any difficulties with your slides not changing, or you're having problems with audio, try refreshing your browser. Most of the time that's pressing F5. Also, if you have issues still, feel free to post those technical problems through the Q&A panel, and we will do our best to assist you as well. This will be recorded. It is being recorded, and after the event, you will all receive a link to a copy of the recording so you can listen to this again at your leisure. And here's our agenda. So we are going to introduce our panelists and then talk about the survey and why we did it. Then we'll discuss some of the results with the panel. After which we'll go and do a demo of XAuthor for Excel, and like I said earlier, if there's some time left at the end and some questions remaining, we will do some Q&A at the end as well. So let's introduce our panelists. I'm Eric Dreschfield. I'm hosting this. I am the Advocacy Manager at Apttus. I'm a Salesforce MVP, and you can see my Twitter handle at Eric Dresch up there. Feel free to ping me anytime if you have questions. Joining us also, we have Amy Oplinger. She is a Salesforce consultant with Coastal Cloud. She is the leader of the Cleveland Women in Tech user group, and she is Salesforce Amy on Twitter. Then we also have Kelly Leslie. She is a new Salesforce MVP, a Salesforce consultant with Allium. I'm not going to say that right. She also leads the Wisconsin Women in Tech user group. And on Twitter, she is Chatty Admin without the I. And finally, we have Jocelyn Fenawal joining us. She is the managing partner at OpMentors. She's also a Salesforce MVP and the co-leader of the Chicago Women in Tech user group. And she's Jocelyn Fenawal on Twitter, no D like her last name. So let's get into the meat of our session here. The survey that we took earlier this year was a broad survey of Salesforce admins. It was global in nature, so we had responses from a lot of people. It was geared toward Salesforce admins, and the intent was to try to gain insight into how administrators are using Salesforce and what their goals are and what they need to do to succeed in their roles. We received responses from a wide variety of backgrounds, company sizes, industries, and so on. So let's take a look at the breakout of the survey, the demographics that we received. So what you can see here is we received responses from a variety of company sizes, ranging from the small companies under 100 employees all the way up to companies that had over 100,000 employees. With the bulk of the responses coming from the mid-level range of companies. We had responses from primarily North America, but we did have some from EMEA and APAC. And then we had a wide variety of industries covered by the responses, from technology to business services, including some higher ed and nonprofits, life sciences, communications, and you can see the rest of them on that slide as well. So let's dig into the survey and some of the questions that we asked now. One of the questions that we asked our panelists was, what are your biggest challenges as a Salesforce admin? So let's start with Amy on that one. And Amy, tell us, what kind of challenges do you face?
Sure, thanks, Eric. I think the challenges that I see the most are probably pretty common across most Salesforce boards, having to do with data cleanliness and user adoption. Data cleanliness and user adoption, I think, go hand in hand. And user adoption can really be a result of anything from lack of executive buy-in to the end user being kind of resistant to change. And those things, when you have those lack of executive buy-in and the resistance of the end users to change, your data might not be as clean as you'd like it to be. They're not really being careful about what's going in the system. So those are the two things that I see the most across orgs.
Thanks, Amy. Can we get to the next slide, please? Kelly, how about you? What do you see? Anything different?
Definitely want to include and tag on to Amy's comment of the buy-in from the peers, coworkers, and leadership. I think that's number one that I've been seeing. I've also been seeing a shift in the culture, as well as now it's time to focus on business processes. And the people that are buying Salesforce is more than IT now. It's your business units, it's your sales, it's your marketing. So really making sure that the right people are included in understanding. The other thing that I see as a big, big challenge is I'm an admin and I don't have enough time to do it all, right? Either you're an accidental admin or you're a solo admin, or maybe you're an admin that has many different hats on within your one organization. So those are the two challenges. So going back to Amy's comment of buy-in, and then also not enough time in my day.
Okay. That's probably an issue for a lot of people, Kelly. Thanks. Jocelyn, anything else you want to add there? You've got a slightly different perspective, I know, with your role.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of more in the consultant side and the managing side, what I see a lot for clients is that continued business process efficiency and process automation. So how can you take what's already been built and continually evolve and improve it? When you're showing efficiencies, I think user adoption, kind of they go hand in hand. You want your users to not only see the efficiencies, but allow the business to grow in itself. So a lot of these things kind of all tie together and have single threads, but it's a great way to show that all these different silos kind of work together, and breaking those down, that if your users aren't happy, maybe they need more efficiencies or more training. But where I tend to always come back to is the business process and how to make that efficient. And then everything can cascade from there.
Sounds great.
Yeah, and if I could jump in.
So what we, oh yeah, go ahead, Kelly.
So one of the things totally tying together Amy and Jocelyn is this shift of the role of the admin. So when I was an admin back in 2010, it was more about the button click side of it. Where I think this shift is occurring culturally is we as admins are now becoming more like business analysts. We need to know our business processes, and also we need to know our end users. So kind of tying it all together with a pretty little bow, that's where I think the culture shift comes in, and knowing your business processes, and also knowing how to, be that person that's configuring Salesforce.
That's great, Kelly. So if you look at the results of the survey that we took, what you see on the screen, data administration, user adoption, integration with other systems, those really all tie into the shift that you just mentioned, where the hat that the admin wears is more of the business analyst role than simply clicking the buttons and doing the configuration. Mm-hmm. So that's fantastic. Mm-hmm. So let's move on to our next question and our next slide. So where do you want to see improvements? What's the one area that you plan to focus on the most for 2017? Kelly, why don't we start with you?
All right, how much time do I have? Okay, so I'm going to say one thing, and I think it's the improvement has to be on the admin. I think it's our job as admins to be the cheerleader for the platform. And what do I mean by that? I'm not saying you need to carry around pom-poms, but what I am saying is that you need to help your leadership and your project sponsors understand the capabilities and the functionality of Salesforce. bottom line. The role is really up to you as the admin to be the expert. So if that means, you know, meeting with your project sponsor on a regular basis, do that regularly so that they are informed. You know, consider, you know, developing like a roadmap so that you get buy-in from your leadership to make sure that it matches your, you know, corporate initiatives strategically. So again, I feel like this shift is huge, and it's really up to us as admins to be the leaders in the organization.
Great, Kelly. Thank you. So, Amy, what about you? What's most important for you in 2017?
Well, I would definitely agree with Kelly, and it kind of ties into what I feel is most important, and that's helping clients, and this goes for solo admins or the clients that we see in a consulting business, helping them keep up with the constant changes that are going on in Salesforce. Like Kelly said, the admins for these systems have to be empowered, and with all of the releases and all of the great changes that are occurring, it can be overwhelming. It can be very difficult to keep up. So I agree with Kelly. I think empowering the admin and then also focusing on the changes that are being made and how we can, you know, position our clients, our admins to best, you know, understand and grasp and implement those changes in Salesforce.
Great. Jocelyn, anything you want to add?
I mean, these are great. I love your guys' points. They're amazing. One thing that I would love to see is data integrity and getting clients to understand what that is and how that helps them. That not only is clean data good, but the communication of data and setting the expectations to what the data is and what it should mean to them. So a report's great, but what does that mean? How do you look at that data? How do you let that help you in the efficiencies? So that's one thing I would love to see, you know, just a universal adoption on, and even internally what we preach at our company and what we preach to our clients, you know, what is the communication of that data? So it's clean, great, quality is there, but what can we expect from it, and how do we manage those expectations with our end users, our leadership, our ops team, all across the board?
Great.
So can I ask a question for? Can I have a question for Jocelyn then? How do you envision that happening for an admin?
So I think, you know, with admins, it's a lot of communication, setting expectations, and, you know, to your point of you know, gathering those business processes, right? What is leadership management? What the key business metrics, like you mentioned, being in alignment with those, and then communicating back what should the expectation be. So if we're looking to get an opportunity pipeline report, well, in order to provide that and provide great data, what's the expectation of our users? So not only the expectation, but giving them tools and giving them ways to increase efficiency in them getting the data in, and making it as easy on the end users as possible so that they're as excited about the data and the org as we all are.
Great. So let's take a look at what the survey respondents said. And on this next slide, what you'll see is like 5 or 6 out of the top 10 things that the survey respondents indicated was important for improvement, all centered around data. Data quality, reporting, collaboration, data administration, they're all up there. They're all big, hot topics that everybody feels like needs improvement. So great tips that you're sharing. Hopefully everybody listening will be able to take some things home with them and start making progress. So let's move on to our next question. So thinking about your job responsibilities as an admin, what tasks do you view as most important and your main responsibilities? Jocelyn, let's start with you this time.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Eric. So as an admin and also kind of serving and training as an admin for our clients, one thing that I always focus on is the learning of the business process and how to automate it. Common theme, I love operations, so kind of built my job around that I love the idea of taking a problem that the business has and trying to solve it and getting that solution in Salesforce and making it efficient. Also, cleaning up data. As an admin, I feel like that's an important part and kind of the theme that we're all seeing, and making sure that I understand the tools that are out there, the best of the breed tools, the tools that I personally like to use, and encouraging our clients to use those tools as well.
Great, thanks, Jocelyn. Amy, any words of wisdom? What's hot for you on your responsibilities?
For me, training. Everything that Jocelyn said, and then as well as training how to use what we've built out. That is near and dear to my heart. I love training end users. I used to be in their shoes. I love seeing their aha moments when they figure out, oh, this really is going to help me do my job better. So everything that Jocelyn said as far as data integrity and cleanliness and working and learning the business processes and things like that, and then piling on the training on top of that, those are the main areas that I'm in right now, as should be all admins, really.
Right, training is very important, that's true. And not just for the admins, but for the end users as well. Kelly, anything you want to add?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had two. One of them, I think, Amy, you just totally touched on really well, and that was education. So coming down to what you just said, Eric, educating, the end users as well as the admins. But one thing that I think is really important as well, besides the data as well as educating, but thinking about your role as a relationship manager. So really identifying your key players, your key users, your stakeholders, and building a relationship with them even stronger. Making sure that their needs are getting met, and then taking that into the realm of the process and improving the process.
Great. I'm seeing a trend here. Kelly, you're more of a people and process person. I think people first almost, which is interesting. So let's take a look at the survey results then on this question and see what the respondents of our survey said. So the highlighted ones in blue are the big things that were the hot items: enhanced user experience, increased productivity. There's data again on increased data accuracy, and then user adoption. Those were the top four. And Kelly, to your point, those really all center around the user and the people, almost more than anything else. So that's pretty interesting. It all really ties well together. So I've got one more question that I'd like to ask all of you. In a perfect world, if you had no limitations whatsoever, what would your Salesforce org look like? Would it be all puppies, coffees, and rainbows, or what? So, Amy, let's go with you first and hear what a perfect dream org looks like for you.
Oh my gosh, are you ready? Because I think about this all the time. My perfect dream org is where every single end user is just as enthusiastic and as excited about Salesforce as I am. They love using it every day. They put all of the correct information fully in every field on every record. And everybody knows how to use it, and everybody loves it, and we're all just like a big Ohana at work. That's my ideal org. And then if I could have another, since this is an ideal world, my ideal org would probably not contain a lick of code.
Okay. Jocelyn, how about you?
Yeah, I think, if I could paint a picture of my entire perfect org, puppies and coffee would be absolutely included in it. And, really would love this ability to just have all the collaboration and the Ohana feeling that Amy represents, that, I think we kind of all embody as part of this community and part of the admin community. I think that feeling of we're all in this together and being in the org, collaborating together, data's great, efficiencies are great, having our auto emails, but the sense that we're all driving towards the same purpose and using chatter collaboration tools to keep all the focus together and keep this almost utopia feeling where everyone knows where everything is. We're not using email. We're, kind of moving forward together and all marching along the same path would be my dream org.
Fantastic. So Kelly, anything else you care to add there? What's a dream look like for you?
Oh, gosh, rainbows. But I want to bring it back to Amy. So Amy, you said something that really, really sparked it for me. And you said something about users using the tool at what capacity?
100%. 100%.
Yay!
That deserves confetti.
Yeah, there we go.
There it is.
Yay.
Yay.
Totally have to agree, 100%. Getting people to use the tool and to want to use the tool.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good. That would be ideal if everyone in your org uses it appropriately, puts in the data that makes sense. You probably, I don't think any of you mentioned this, but you probably all implied it. Having your users with the ability to access the system wherever, whenever, and however they can. So mobile devices, for example, that's good. So
Eric, I think to that point, I remember this moment that the client and this sales team member was getting her demo training, and she opened the mobile and got giddy that she could do everything on mobile, and she was so excited to use the mobile. And I think that feeling is just something that if we could replicate that in every user in every org, that would just expand and grow the Ohana.
Makes sense.
It might make the hashtag why admins drink go away, though.
True.
Probably not.
True. It's a good hashtag.
That could be. Yeah. So we just had a question come in from one of our listeners, and he's curious about what data accuracy means to you. And so let's jump into that. If any of you have a comment on data accuracy, let's talk about that briefly right now. Who wants to go first?
I can. I defined data accuracy more around what are the important points that need to be captured by your organization. So what do I mean by that? So identifying and working with your leadership, management, your C-suite people, trying to figure out the bottom line of what is it and why are we using such a tool. This rolls up into the reporting aspect. So by identifying that those important fields need to be filled in, and if they're not filled in, then what does that really mean?
I would agree with you, Kelly, and would like to add to that and say I think it's really helpful when companies implement and admins implement naming conventions and agree on the format of the data as well. Is it going to be U.S.? Is it going to be USA? Or how are we naming our opportunities and things like that? I think that naming conventions are very helpful in data accuracy.
Yes, absolutely. I think another thing to add to that is the consistency in which data is being updated. So, we have our opportunity, we have our naming convention, but are we massaging it? Are we updating? Are we always putting in our latest knowledge? Even if maybe we start at saying, an opportunity is a great example, our close date. We put one in there with the intention of knowing what that is, but we continue to massage it. We continue to always assess and say, where can we improve? Where can we add a new update? Maybe we learned something new about our contact. And so keeping the consistency, like you said, Amy, about naming conventions, what does this date actually mean to all of us? But then continuing to improve it and always update it and not have static records.
Right. So a thing I'd like to add too is both into regards to Amy and Jocelyn, and it's monitoring your data. Builder reports I think, Jocelyn, you guys do this where you have a report that actually shows specific gotchas. So if you know that you need to be tracking the close date based on the stage, then you need to have a report. And that's the job of the admin, right? Going back to data integrity, but more importantly, those relationships that you have with those users. Call that user and just say, hey, I noticed that, you know, you have a few opportunities that were supposed to close last quarter. What's going on? It's also an opportunity then to bring that to the manager's attention and have that as a coaching mechanism. They can then call that user and say, hey, what can I do to help you to close that opportunity? So really the power is in the data.
Okay, very good. So let's move on to the next question that we asked our survey members, and that really centered around the data. We asked where they imported data to or from, where they exported it from, how they manipulated the data, what they did to data in order to get it into their Salesforce org. So Kelly, let's start with you and talk about your experience with data migration, data administration, and the tools that you use to manage data for your day-to-day life.
Sure. So I love Jitterbit. This is a tool that I like to call it the import wizard, but on steroids. You can do a lot with it. And some of the examples of how I use that tool, and you could use any tool for that matter, but there's a customer that has products with pricing that changes quarterly. So by using a tool like that, we're able to quickly update the pricing and the products accordingly. This is something you could schedule. This is something that you could just do manually, but it helps. The other example is updating the opportunity stage. So we've had situations where there's another tool, another system in place, Intact, for instance, and the billing system has received their first payment, so we have to set up an integration of some sort or use a CSV file that quickly uploads the opportunity stage to close one. That's another example. So the bottom line is these tools that we use, were the ones that I use anyways, all use CSV formats. You know, it's an easy way to extract the data and push the data. I know there's even in-between tools that integrate to systems. If I could leave 2 tips with the listeners, if you are going to do like an integration between the two, I always like to make sure that there's an external identification number in the other system as well into this one, so it's an easy match. It saves a lot of time. And then the other tip is, this is what I like to do. When I know that I'm updating Salesforce, I always like to have on the back end either like a checkbox field or a pick list field. There's something to identify that I just updated this record. That way I can report on it easily and quickly to identify, hey, these are the last records that I then updated.
Great. Amy, I know you've got some comments to add to this.
Yeah, I think, first of all, Kelly, those are great tips, especially the external ID, and that makes the migration so much easier. As far as data migration, you know, it depends on the client, it depends on the data. Data Import Wizard is nice for small, quick, fast jobs. My go-to is dataloader.io. I love that. I think it's very easy to use and kind of even I can do it. So it's not difficult to understand and get up and get your data in there and mapped and everything very cleanly and efficiently. A lot of the things that Kelly said about, you know, migrating data from legacy systems, there's a lot of tools, and what you as an admin need to keep in mind is you need to see where it's coming from, what what the data looks like, what you're trying to accomplish, what you're dumping into Salesforce, and what you as an admin are most comfortable using. That's what it comes down to, is you're going to use the tool that makes sense for you and that makes your job as an admin easier. So for me, dataloader.io is my go-to.
Okay, great. So Jocelyn, while you're describing your experiences with the go-to data imports and things, let's also pull up the slide with the results from the survey so that people can see what everybody who responded talks about. So go ahead, Jocelyn. Let's hear your experience.
Awesome. Yeah. So we do a lot of integrations with QuickBooks, ERP systems, moving legacy data over from those. So, you know, we kind of have two tools that is our go-to. First one we do is dataloader.io, like Amy. I like the interface. And then our preferred method and the second tool that we use is XAuthor. So kind of we're unprompted, but this is, I personally really like the tool. I like the ease of it, and we find at our business we liked it so much. We're partners, but I really like the user experience, and I think from migrating Excel sheets and data over, that as a tool, it's set up to where it's very easy to use. I feel like sometimes other tools, it's you got to learn the lingo that they have as opposed to making it what you want to use. So those are our preferred tools.
Great. And that's a perfect segue into a demo of XAuthor now. So let's dive into that.
Hi, everyone. So I've already logged in, so we're going to skip some of the beginning part of this just so we can show as much as possible. But just kind of the quick 30-second introduction to XAuthor. XAuthor is a technology that Apttus has developed that extends Salesforce's enterprise controls, its security to Microsoft Excel. So think of Microsoft Excel now as an alternative user interface into Salesforce. It's sitting right on top of the platform. It allows Excel to be bidirectional. So you can pull data out of Salesforce and surface it into an Excel spreadsheet. You can make your changes in Excel and you can push those changes back. A lot of the simple use cases fall into just increasing overall user adoption and efficiency. Instead of having to go record by record, field by field, which would be the browser experience, you can look at your data in Excel. You can format the data however you would like, and then make your changes and have those changes reflect back in the platform. So what I've started with is a use case that is very popular and common with our customers, which is updating opportunities. A lot of what I'm going to show today is using standard objects, but we do allow you to use custom objects, so we're going to see some examples of that as well. And just remember that XAuthor works on any type of object, and it can work on any number of objects simultaneously. So I'm in an Excel workbook. This workbook actually lives in Salesforce. So that's another thing that we're achieving with XAuthor, is kind of getting away from some of the baggage that Excel has today, which is spreadsheets being emailed around, Excel spreadsheets being stored on desktops, not knowing which version is the correct version, who should have access. So these Excel workbooks are stored in Salesforce so that you can control who has access to them, as well as which versions they have access to. So all that administration is done in Salesforce. So a very simple example of this is I can click on a button, and the buttons that you're seeing at the top of the screen, they can be set up and configured really however you want. They do two things. They allow you to retrieve data from Salesforce. They allow you to update data back to Salesforce, and they create a user experience. That user experience is really up to who's setting this up. And who is setting this up is the XAuthor designer, which you can see as an additional tab here. That designer's job is objects, fields, and what's the layout. So you can see that I've clicked the button and I'm now seeing, and let me actually zoom in a little bit, make this easier for everyone to view. But you can see that I'm now looking at a list of opportunities. it's going to always be based on who the user that logged in with their Salesforce credentials and what data they have access to. So if I can only see the opportunities that I own, then I'm going to see that data set. If I'm a manager and I can see my team's opportunities, then I would be able to see those opportunities. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that all field level security is supported as well as all data types. So if you were to go into a field like stage, this is a pick list in Salesforce. My pick list values are being reflected here. So as a user, you can jump around from record to record. You're in Excel, so you can do things in drag and whatever you would like. You can make updates to any number of fields, and when you're ready, I'll just make one more update. We'll go ahead and click Save. This save real time is taking all the changes that I just made and pushing it back to Salesforce. Any workflow, approval process, trigger, anything that you've set up in Salesforce will continue to work the exact same way. So you're really getting Excel as the user interface. You're getting the speed, the familiarity of Excel. You can still do any Excel function like sorting, filtering, running macros, formulas, but it gives the user the ability to make these mass updates. And again, this can be used by an end user, a business user. It can also be used by an admin who's doing things like cleaning up data, making changes to territories, and I'll show you some of those examples as well. So not only can you pull data down into a single tab, and this is looking at opportunities, at the same time, we're pulling in data for our contacts, so any number of objects across any number of worksheets, and you're in Excel, so any Excel functionality like charts, pivot tables, those things can also be leveraged and built out so that as I bring in data from Salesforce using XAuthor, these charts and pivot tables are reflecting what I'm looking at in sheets 1 and 2. So there's a lot of customers and a lot of people out there that love Excel charts and pivot tables. You can continue to leverage those. The last couple of things I'll mention in this use case is that on a single row, so if we just take this row as an example, most of these fields are coming from the opportunity object. If I just navigate to the right part of the screen, the fields in column N through Q are coming from the account object. So fields coming from two different objects in the same row side by side. You can actually go N number of objects in your hierarchy on the single row. So you could have fields from an account, from an opportunity, from a quote proposal, from line items, all on the same row, and actually be able to do side-by-side updates. So not only can you do those side-by-side updates, you can actually get away from some of the Salesforce reporting limitations, which only allows you to connect up to 3 objects. So a lot of our customers are using XAuthor for some advanced reporting and analytics because, again, there is no limit on the number of objects and fields. Okay, last thing I'll show in here is, if we remember, let me just move this GoToMeeting over. We talked a little bit about these user menus. So in a lot of cases, when someone is setting up a use case like this, they might not know what the user wants to look at from a data standpoint. So maybe I don't want to look at every opportunity. I only want to look at opportunities in a specific quarter, past a certain stage, with a close date that equals December and a value over 500,000. So any number of filters and parameters. So by enabling screens like the one you're seeing right now, you let the user provide input to the system to get data based out on those inputs. And the screen you're looking at is not a Visualforce screen, so there's no coding behind it. As a designer, you get to configure the top portion, which is what do you want to search on, and the bottom portion, which is what is the user seeing as they filter through the data. So think of this as a window into Salesforce. And an example of this might be, I want to look at maybe only accounts that equal this region. You can see that my results are changing based on that filter. So this screen is very powerful for data mining to be able to see any combination of filters and see if anything actually matches it. Again, you can have any combination. So I could say that region, but I also want to look at this industry or these industries, search again, and now I have 25 accounts that match that region and those industries. So you can get very creative, and you can actually have up to 20 filters in this top screen that you can combine. And it gives you and/or capabilities very similar to how you would set that up in a Salesforce report. An example of this, and I'll just kind of clear that, and actually just search for a name is once I'm ready, and let's say I've filtered down, I can now select the results, and without having to change views or go into a different workbook or worksheet, it's going to get rid of my current data set that we're looking at together and bring in a completely different data set based on the input that I just provided to the system. So it's going to only show the opportunities for ACME, which is the account I selected. It's going to show only the contacts for that account, and my chart and pivot table on sheet 3 is going to reflect to show you that data as well. This is just a feature in here that allows you to save the entire workbook back into notes and attachments if that's what you wanted to do. We can just say, let's skip that for right now. But notice what it just did. It pulled in just the opportunities, just the contacts, and again, our chart and pivot table is reflecting to show you what's happening on sheets 1 and 2. And just as a reminder, you are in Excel. So if you have Excel formulas, even though this is a very basic one, but you can have very complex formulas, you can take the results of these formulas, and in this case, there's a value, 18 million and change, and save this value back to Salesforce. So there's times where you might run into some Salesforce formula limitations, just the amount of formulas or the complexity of formulas. You can leverage XAuthor to handle those formulas and have the results saved back to Salesforce. Because Excel does a very good job at handling large data sets and running lots of calculations. That's primarily a big reason why a lot of users continue to use Excel. Okay, moving on. So we looked at one example of just kind of opportunities. A popular use case that we see a lot of our admins using XAuthor for, which is another set of lists, but it's user management. So being able to manage all of your current users, activating new users, deactivating current users, seeing which users are assigned to which packages, assigning packages to users, so kind of that administration aspect of managing all of your internal users. So just like before, you can break it up into as many menu items as you would like. Again, I can come in here and just say, I want to retrieve all the current users that are currently in this environment that I'm connected to, and this is going to just bring in all of my users, and then I can look at some of the additional tabs as well and look at for a specific package as well as based on users as well. So we'll go ahead and click on this. We'll let it retrieve. And just so you're aware, the performance and speed is usually a lot quicker. I'm on Wi-Fi right now, but you can typically pull in about 40 to 50,000 records in about 10 to 15 seconds. To make an update to about 40 to 50,000 records, it's typically twice as long. So you're looking at between 30 and 45 seconds depending on your machine's performance as well as your internet connection. So we'll go ahead and click this retrieval, though again, let it retrieve, it's processing, and then we'll look at the data once it gets brought in.
And even with the slower connection that you're seeing right now, it's still way faster than updating records one at a time in the browser.
And as that's going, why don't we look at a couple other things at the same time, so we'll do that. Okay, so let's go into a different use case. So this is a use case that allows me to leverage XAuthor to dedupe records. So I know earlier on in the conversation there was a lot of discussions around cleaning up data, making sure your data is correct, the integrity of your data. So XAuthor is a great tool to do those types of tasks as well. So in this particular example, I'm going to be looking at contacts and products. Again, you can look at any type of object, and I think probably that one spreadsheet eventually is pulled in. So you can see as I toggle back, here's all those users, and again, any field in any order. Something I didn't mention earlier is you're never going to be able to go below your Salesforce security. And what I mean by that is, and typically for a Salesforce admin, you have probably most of the rights that you can almost do anything. But if a user cannot update a certain field in Salesforce, then they will not be able to update a field using XAuthor. If a user doesn't have read-only or can't even view a certain field, that field will come in blank. So again, it's going to look at your Salesforce security the user's profile, permission, and what data they have access to. I'll go back to that example here, though. So we'll go ahead and click Retrieve. This is going to retrieve a list of contacts. And the way that we set this up when we were designing it is we determined which combinations of fields are going to match to give us kind of our dedupe records. So we can see that what it did was it pulled in a list of all of our contacts. And again, you could configure this a different way. And it's highlighting really quickly to me as a user what fields or what records detected data collision or actually deduplicates. So we can look at all these records. I can select them very quickly and it will highlight them. And from here you can then basically take an action. Do you want to delete records? Do you want to merge them into one? But it gives you the ability to, as you're setting this up, determine what field combination you want to use, and then you can have XAuthor pull in the data very quickly and see those things visually and then make some type of action. Okay, last two examples are the following. So we've looked at some pretty simple list examples, meaning we're pulling in a list of records. We want to be able to make mass updates. You can also leverage XAuthor to take something that's already being done in Excel. You know, a lot of our customers, when we talk to them, you either take an existing Excel spreadsheet and you try to create a Visualforce page to kind of replicate it, which at times works, other times it's difficult, it's expensive, and it doesn't really deliver the user experience that you're trying to get after. So in those use cases, we tell our customers, keep your existing Excel spreadsheet. And they can be extremely complex. They can have multiple tabs, you can have pricing tables, you can have macros and formulas, different grids and different summary sheets. Leave this as is, but bring Salesforce in on the back end. So use XAuthor, map your objects and fields, so you would have created a data model in Salesforce. Allow the user to continue to use this Excel spreadsheet because they're already familiar, they're already comfortable, they've been using this for years. So you almost have 100% user adoption day one because you're keeping the same format. And XAuthor now allows you to bring the enterprise controls and security that Salesforce offers to these spreadsheets. So in this particular example, I'm letting the user select an option. You can have as many subset screens driven off of what I selected first. So I selected a parent record, and now I'm seeing the child records. And from here, it's now bringing in data right on top of that existing format in a completely unstructured way that a user wants to visualize the data, currently how they're looking at it in Excel. The other nice thing about XAuthor is that you can send these Excel spreadsheets to other users because it is Excel. You do have offline capabilities. You do have the ability to take this, save it to your desktop if you want to do something like that, make changes, and when you're ready, you can reconnect, click save, and push those changes back to Salesforce. So we'll make an update here because I want to show something a little bit different. I'll make a change to some of these records or some of these fields. You'll notice that instead of a nice list, we're looking at data in a form. We'll go to another sheet in here, which is data coming in from a couple different related lists. Again, we'll make a few changes together. And when we're done, we'll click Save, which we've been doing. But notice what takes place. I'm going to stop here and show you the details. We just updated 4 different records on 4 different objects, all maintaining the object hierarchy and relationship in about 5 or 10 seconds. And 2 screens were able to visualize data coming in from multiple objects, multiple records, in a view that makes sense to an end user. Instead of having to navigate through Visualforce pages one after the other, I can look at the data how I want to look at it, make my changes, and things will reflect back in Salesforce. Okay. How are we doing? Eric, how are we doing on time?
We're getting close. We've got a few more questions that have come in through the chat window that we want to address. One of them right now is a really perfect time because it's someone asking how XAuthor for Excel can be configured to do lookups using an external ID to match related records. So can you talk about that for a moment, Jarrett?
Yeah, that's a great question. So something I didn't show, but I actually do have up. So this was mentioned earlier when we were talking about data migration. So XAuthor has a data migration wizard that creates a lot of these applications very quickly, because typically when you're thinking of data migration, you're not always just working on a single object. And so if you're working across multiple objects, it's important to maintain the relationship between that data. So as you move data from one environment to another, you're not having to manually create VLOOKUPs, make sure that your opportunities are related to your accounts, your contacts are related to your accounts, and so on and so on. So something that we do in our data migration wizard, first you need to turn on external record ID, which is a feature in Salesforce. So when you turn that on, XAuthor uses that external record ID to maintain the relationship. That's something that XAuthor will handle itself. We do have a metadata tool that will set those record IDs if it's the very first time you're using it. And then from there, that external record ID is what's the constant between org and org. So even though you might have the same account in your sandbox that you have in your production, you're going to have different record IDs. Each one has its own unique Salesforce record ID, but the external record ID is going to be the same. That's how we know when we push changes from one org to the other, if that record already exists, do an update, don't create a new record. If it doesn't exist, go ahead and create a new record, which is an upsert. So those external record IDs is taken care of in our data migration wizard, which we didn't go into today, but we do have a separate webinar that we presented on, which was about an hour of just that functionality. Good question.
Great, thanks, Jared. We've also got a question regarding stage values and whether they display by record type.
They do. So you'll need to add the record type field on your grid, and then from there you would see different drop downs based on those record types. So if it was stage, or if it was any other drop down, or any field that was different depending on the record type, those are supported today.
Great. And then finally, we have a question around the cost of XAuthor for Excel. Can you talk briefly about the licensing?
Yeah, so licensing is per user per month. The only thing that is not included in our enterprise license, which is everything that you've seen today, is that data migration wizard that I just briefly talked about. So the data migration wizard is priced very similar to how Salesforce prices their sandbox. We look at your total licenses with Salesforce, and it's a percentage. And then from there, you're able to use it across any number of orgs. So that's data migration. For the XAuthor Enterprise license, there's some lighter versions of it, but I know everyone probably just wants to hear a number. A general number that's kind of safe to assume is around $40 per user per month. And again, that's going to vary based on volume as well as functionality, because you can mix and match. We have customers today that have executives that just use the reporting only portion of XAuthor, so they actually don't want to push changes back, and they pay for a lighter version. So that 40 number is kind of just a good number to start with.
Great, thanks, Jared. Appreciate that. We do have one more question that came in for our panelists, and that surrounds user adoption and what is it that makes it so much of a challenge and how to address that. Kelly, I see you smiling. You want to take this first?
Sure. The people are the problem. Not the technology.
Somehow I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah. So first off, if I can just add real quick, this is my first time ever getting a demo of XAuthor. So I'm jotting down notes, and let me tell you, my first challenge that I mentioned was I don't have enough time to do all this. So seeing that tool can make my life so much easier, let alone my end users. So anyways, going back to the original question, user adoption. How do you overcome that? You got to get their buy-in. You need to manage those relationships. There's a reason why you're in the position that you are, and that is because you're relatable. Very, very key to know what motivates your end users. So if that means setting up office hours every week on Fridays where people can come into your office, and or maybe you're dialing in on a webinar, you're just opening that door to be a resource for them. You know, you could be a sounding board. You could be helping them coach them through how to do X, Y, and Z. But really, I think user adoption is the biggest challenge. And Jocelyn, Amy, what kind of thoughts do you guys have on user adoption?
Yeah,
I'd like to go, yeah. Go ahead.
Awesome, thanks, Amy. So what I tend to find a lot with user adoption is what's in it for me, right? So I'm putting this data in, and it's great, right? The interface, mobile, it's all great, but at the end of the day, how's it going to help me do my job better? And I think as an admin, part of our role is being almost that Sherpa for them, guiding them and mentoring them to say, okay, yeah, you're putting this data in, and data could go in itself. That would be amazing. But what do you get out of it? So, and what makes, because it's different for every user. So when I first started with Salesforce, for me, it was the reporting. I love analytics. I love looking at them and knowing. So even if it's focused on me, my opportunities, my contacts, it's giving me that sense that this tool just isn't for someone to look at a report and make business decisions. It's to make my life easier. So I think guiding that and coaching that drives user adoption. Amy, what were you going to add?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, Jocelyn. Everything Kelly said is right. It is the end user, and you don't like change. If you're a sales rep and you've been doing your job for years, and you've been using spreadsheets for 15 years, and you've been making your numbers for 15 years, and all of a sudden you have to put everything into a system, obviously you're going to have a little bit of an attitude, and I speak from that personally because that was me. So my magic thing for training is finding out that little what's in it for me. Working with everybody learns differently. Everybody has a different what's in it for me. So being a good admin, you have to listen, ask questions, and be on your game and be able to pivot and change and train them in a way that makes sense for them and makes them realize the value of what you're asking them to do.
Fantastic. And while we're on the topic of training and learning, I want to highlight the Apttus Accelerate Conference that's coming up in early May. It's a great place to learn a lot more, not just necessarily about Apttus products, but certainly about Salesforce and CRM as well. We have several different tracks of sessions going on. There'll be around 70 sessions in total with a few keynotes, a little bit of fun as well. So if you can make it out to San Francisco in May, please join us. And for those of you listening on this webinar right now, we do have a special offer for Accelerate, where if you register using the comp code AwesomeAdminComp in all uppercase that you see on the screen now, we will give you a free pass to the conference. So the only thing you'll have to be responsible for on your own is travel to and from San Francisco and your hotel costs. We'll save you almost $700 with that code. So hopefully you can all join us at Accelerate. And I don't see any more questions in the chat window. So thank you all very much for joining us, and be watching for the recording to come out shortly.